Okay, broadcast. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for a conversation about burnout. While everyone's coming into the Zoom call, we're going to wait just a couple minutes to get started here. So get yourself settled, situated. And if you don't mind, jump in the chat and let us know where you are, where you're calling in from, what's on your mind, what's your current situation relative to burnout, and are there any burning questions that you are coming into this Zoom call to get answered? We'd love to learn that up front so we can really maximize your time here in the next hour. So welcome everybody as you're coming in. We've still got more people coming in, which is awesome. Feel free to jump in the chat, where you're from, what your situation is. Do you have family? Do you have kids? Do you have extended family with you? Are you living alone? What's on your mind relative to burnout? So Mitch can see kind of where everybody is and if there's any specific questions that you're really hoping to get answered today, and she can make sure to weave those into the conversation. We will have time for Q&A at the end too, but we'd love to make this informative and interactive with your participation. So we will get started here in just a moment, just waiting for everybody else to come in. Thanks so much for joining us today. All right, and thanks for those of you for jumping in the chat. We've got people from all over Washington. I love it. Thank you for sharing your situation. Anything you're comfortable sharing with. What do you think about burnout? What's on your mind? How is burnout showing up for you? What are you hoping to get out of today? Any questions? Anything about your situation that will help Mitch, the speaker, even talk about it more. All right. Okay. Well, I think we have everyone here so far. So let's go ahead and get started. So thank you so much for joining us today for a conversation about burnout. I'm Lisa Hufford, founder and CEO of Simplicity Consulting. We're an enterprise marketing services company that helps big brands go to market faster. And our mission here at Simplicity Consulting is to help everyone thrive in the new world of work. And that includes ongoing learning and development. So today we are so proud to sponsor this conversation that so many people are talking about right now around burnout. Look, the juggle is real. I'm right there with you guys. I've got 2 teenage boys, running a company, writing a book. We all have a lot going on. And the reality is we're all trying to do the best we can every day. One of my favorite mantras is to focus on what you can control. And right now, I don't know about you, but I feel like there's a whole bunch out of my control with racial injustice, the election, economic uncertainty. There's so many things that can lead to stress and kind of build anxiety. But what we're hoping today is to really focus on yourself, for each of us to focus on what each of us can control to help us manage that stress, that anxiety that we're all in. And really, we're all in this together to support each other. So that's what I'm really hoping to convey. And I know Mitch, the teacher here today, is hoping you're walking out of here in the next hour. Even if it's one takeaway, you just feel a little more confident to be able to manage this fatigue and burnout that we're all facing today. So it is with gratitude, my pleasure, my honor to introduce our teacher today, Mitch Shepard. She's the CEO of Human Inclusion Partners, a company dedicated to unleashing the full potential of diverse talent. She's an applied behavioral scientist and also the founder of World Leadership Series, which stands for Women in Real Life. It's a professional development program to elevate and advance female leaders. For the past 20 years, Mitch has worked across industries and companies as a trusted advisor and coach to some of the world's top leaders, including Amazon, Microsoft, FedEx, REI, and many more. Mitch has been working with diverse people from various walks of life for the past 25 years, beginning with nearly a decade spent leading people on wilderness expeditions, guiding teams to achieve extraordinarily challenging goals despite often unpredictable environments and ever-changing landscapes. I'll tell you, if there's ever a time that we feel like we're in the wilderness, it's probably right now. So we're so grateful that Mitch is going to bring some of her expertise to us today. She helps people achieve extraordinary business results while also maintaining a healthy sense of balance in their personal lives, and she knows firsthand what it takes to juggle competing demands as a CEO, a mother, a wife, and a dedicated global citizen and a world traveler. So I've got my notebook and pen ready to learn. So I'm going to hand it over to Mitch now to take the floor. Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. It's so good to meet you all. And thanks for chatting in a few words about where you're from and kind of what circumstances you're up against right now. I saw a lot of parents. I saw folks from all over the country. I saw some of you, experiencing some burnout because you just need a change in your role. I saw some comments about how do I have enough energy or patience left over for all the hats that I wear. And this is what we've been hearing about from absolutely everyone we work with, over the past several months. So I'm so glad you're here getting some support for yourselves. I want to also quickly introduce you to Jenny. Jenny Mesdag is on my team. She's here on camera with me. One, because I'm a public speaker. So it's so nice to have at least one face shining back a reaction to me while I speak. And also because she'll be taking notice of the chat throughout the whole session. So you don't need to wait or feel like you're going to distract me by throwing in questions all throughout. You can put your reactions in, you can put additional ideas in the chat, you can put your burning questions in there, some of the things you're struggling with, etc. You don't have to wait for an invitation, although there will be some specific invitations. And Jenny will take the role of kind of reading some of that back to me. So thanks for being here. In this talk, we're going to go through kind of four main sections. The first, I'm going to lead you through some reflection to just get a sense of how are you doing right now? How are you feeling? How burnt out or not are you currently? Then we're going to go into some reflection exercises to really get you kind of clear and grounded in your core values, so that any tweaks or adjustments you make to how you're spending your time, your energy, or what your schedule looks like can be really rooted in and shaped by what's important to you, not just what an outsider says is important, but what's important to you. Then we'll go through a couple of the common culprits of burnout. I'm sure you'll resonate with those. And also, and most importantly, what the heck do you do about it? Offering some strategies, some guidance, a toolkit, if you will, around how you can better manage through what is a pretty stressful time for a lot of folks, including many of you on the line, as I can see. And then, of course, we'll wrap it up with some Q&A. So type those questions in anytime, and Lisa and Jenny will both be paying attention. So the first kind of context setter that I want to do here is that one of the big themes I've heard over the last few months in working with clients across all kinds of, fast-paced, innovative industries and really different family situations is that all of the things, or many of the things that we used to do to blow off steam or transition between our work day and our home day, whether it was a commute or a ferry ride or, meditation or an exercise class or whatever it was, we had these routines, and our routines have been tipped on their heads, and we've had to rethink, how do I stay grounded? How do I stay healthy when so much and productive, when so much of how I used to do that has just been flipped upside down? So I hope that through this presentation, through this time together, that you'll have at least one or two moments where you go, I never really thought about it like that. Maybe I do need to do a little more of that. Or maybe I can lower the expectation on myself around that thing that I'm holding myself to such a high standard around. So I want you to think about things differently. And as a starting place, as I promised, I want you to simply reflect upon, how are you doing? And the best way to know how you're doing is to get really good at doing a thing I call the feelings audit. Some of you are very fluent in the language of feelings. Others of you are like, feelings? Mad, sad, glad, afraid. I can name 4, which is why I put a lot of variety of feelings on this slide. And I want you to simply answer for yourself, or in the chat if you're comfortable doing so, what are some of the feelings words that describe how you've been doing lately? So it's likely not just one thing. It might be that you feel grateful and inspired at times, maybe even content. There may be times where you feel hurried, frustrated, overwhelmed, impatient, irritated, angry, right? There's all kinds of things people are feeling right now. What are you feeling? So 3, 4, 5 words that describe how you're doing.
And Mitch, we have some comments coming in already. Roller coaster, overwhelmed, frustrated, anxious, distracted, anxious, grateful, jazzed, impatient, sluggish, confident, overwhelmed, a lot and quite a range.
Oh yeah. In fact, sometimes we've been using this very clever app. We're in a bit of a tight time frame today, but we'll do this word cloud where it kind of starts to appear real time as people type in what they're feeling. And overwhelmed is always, in the last several weeks, it's the number one thing. It's like whoosh, overwhelmed slashed across the screen. So you're not alone. So the next thing I want you to reflect on, and whether you think it's possible or not, just let yourself dream a little bit for a minute. And I want you to think about what you would like to feel more of. What would you like more of in your life? Peace of mind, contentment, joy, patience, love, calm, passion, all sorts of things. But what would you like more of? Again, it's not, is this possible? It's, I want that.
And we've got some comments coming in now. Peace, confidence, energized, organized, calm, health, energy, time to think.
Yeah.
More peace.
Okay. So as we go through this workshop today, whether you wrote some words down in your phone or on a piece of paper, or you threw them into the chat just now, any decisions you make about changing your behavior, I want you to run them through a little litmus test. And this is what it is. I want you to ask yourself, those feelings I want more of, joy, peace, confidence, will these decisions bring me closer to feeling more of that thing, right? Because what we really do when we set goals, what we're really going after is a feelings state, right? When we want a different job, or we want to go on vacation to a certain place, or we want a loved one in our life, or we want a better relationship with someone. It's usually what we want. What we're going after is a feeling. And that's what we're going after here too, is a feeling of wellness, a feeling of peace of mind, a feeling of productivity, right? So think about that as you make some decisions. So one of the things I wanted to just get out there kind of early on in this talk is what is burnout? So some of you probably have been in burnout. You may be there now. You have a relative knowledge of what this is, but let me tell you some of the kind of biological things and also some of the signs and symptoms of burnout. So when we burn out, what tends to happen is that when we otherwise had a positive attitude and a wealth of energy and, maybe a relatively positive outlook on life and enough energy to kind of get through our days, you wake up in the morning excited to go through your day as opposed to like, oh, not another day, right? And when you approach burnout, that all starts to change. So if you're a really emotive person, it might be that you're more easily angered, triggered, upset. You might burst into tears. You might be really showing the emotion. If you're someone who goes more towards the keep it all in, implode, you might be extra quiet. You might be withdrawn. You might be wanting more time to yourself. It might start taking on physical symptoms. So Arianna Huffington, who eventually started Thrive Global, that is currently thriving, she has a story that's, I wish it was the only story I've heard like this, but where she ran her adrenal glands, her level of fatigue and her pace was not sustainable, but she didn't know that. And she kept pushing herself and pushing herself and pushing herself and getting very little sleep and just burning the candle at both ends. And until one day she woke up, passed out, has no memory of this, but she woke up and had broken her nose. She'd fallen straight down on her face and broken her nose. And I can't tell you, in the most extreme situations, I have heard people who have stories like that, who and that story ends with an injury. It ends with an anxiety attack. It ends with a broken relationship that was important to someone or some sort of health crisis. So if that's you, you may need more today than some tips about how to tweak and change. And so one of the things I want to say early on is, look, there is absolutely no shame in taking a break. There's no shame in therapy, hypnotherapy, massage, acupuncture, alternative medicine, whatever it is that you need. to get yourself healthy and back on track. If some of those signs and symptoms feel familiar at the extreme, you may want to get some, professional support. The other thing that happens in burnout is in a lot more feelings around hopelessness, anxiety. What I've heard a ton of lately is, as we already said, overwhelm, but also worry and guilt is off the charts, particularly for parents. So one of the things that I noticed, I've got two young kids, 5th grade and 8th grade. Well, I guess they're not that young anymore now that I think about it. And they used to go away to school. Everybody did their own thing throughout the day. And I could focus on work and didn't have people interrupting me multiple times a day. Can you look at this? Can you help me with that? What about this? Can I eat this right now? Do you have time to go on a walk? Do you have time to make me lunch? And for every 1 or 2 yeses, I have several no's that I have to dole out every single day. And it's overwhelming and it is very guilt-inducing. So I bet you have some of those too. So with that, I'd like to take a little poll and to just see what we have on the call today. To what degree are you currently experiencing burnout? Not at all. I just came here proactively. That would be 1. I'm gonna go ahead and launch this poll. Mild, moderate, or severely burnt out. Let's see who we've got. And this is completely anonymous. And regardless of your answer, if you wouldn't mind, after you answer the poll, typing into the chat box just a couple of the circumstances that are causing you to be mild, moderately, or severely burnt out. Everyone so far, I'll go ahead and end the poll and show you these results. Everyone so far, 17% mild, 59% of you are moderate, and 24% of you have classified yourselves as severely burnt out. So I am so glad that you're here. But if you could share with me a couple of the circumstances that are kind of fueling that burnout, that would be helpful. So I can really tailor this. And Jenny, as the responses come in, go ahead and read those to me.
We've got a couple coming in so far. Someone here is so exhausted and can't say no, just can't say no sometimes. Work seems not important. Everything revolves around being at home. Let's see, they're coming in pretty fast. Saying on health issues, parenting while working, so many video calls, the unknown of COVID.
Yeah.
Let's see, boss working 24/7 and it trickles down, anxiety about setting those boundaries.
Oh yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that since they've been home, working from home, and I'm going to guess that many of you on this call are in a lot of meetings by video all day long. And I don't know about you, but at first everyone was like, oh, this is so cool. Like, I don't have a commute anymore. I get so much done. But now the longer it's gone on, it's if I have to sit in one more Zoom call, right? Or it's work creep is happening, right? It's because there's so many less things to do outside of work. Many of us are just putting in a lot longer days. Maybe there's nothing else to do. Maybe it's just hard to step away, but it can be overwhelming. Yeah. Any other big themes coming out of that, Jenny?
Pretty consistent themes, just roller coaster of trying to balance the work, the home, all of it.
Yeah. And the uncertainty of the environment we're in, both around COVID, but also, we have this little thing called racial upheaval going on, right? And social and political upheaval. It's really kind of an unprecedented time, to use a very overused word lately. But what I'm here to tell you, and I hope this gives you some hope, is that I love this quote: the cure for exhaustion isn't rest, it's living with wholeheartedness. So yes, we do know that rest is important. Good nutrition is important. Exercising your body and your mind is important. And so often when we think about burnout, we think of it as I'm doing too much work, or too much of this, or saying yes to too many things. And while that is true, burnout is just as much often about doing too few of certain things that are really important to you as it is about doing too much of certain other things. So part of how I want to kind of pivot this conversation is to say, on your best days, your best version of yourself cares about what? What do you value? What makes you really happy? Because what the research shows, and what folks who are really clear about their values know, is that the closer you live in alignment with your values, the generally more happy, fulfilled, and joyful and peaceful you feel. And the further you stray from your personal set of values, the more stressed, fatigued, overwhelmed, sad, more likely you are to burn out. So the very first, one of the very first exercises I want to do with you on the call today is to give you an opportunity to reflect upon and kind of narrow down what are your core values. And I want you to think about your core values as just like this image. This is my friend Matt Walker took this picture. As Lisa said, I'm a big outdoor person. So I love these big, gigantic outdoor images. And this is his wife standing atop this rock pillar. I think this is somewhere in Washington and perhaps in the North Cascades. But in any case, he took this picture, and the second I saw it, I thought, oh, I need that for my values slide. Can I use it? Because this is what values do, right? When you stand on top of your values, it's like the foundation of the house. So I want to give you an opportunity to just get back in touch with what's your foundation and how close or far are you from living that. Interestingly, I've been doing work with corporate groups, you know, high-tech businesses, from small startups to the gigantic ones like the Microsofts and the Amazons of the world. And while companies, all companies have a set of values, right? Pretty much. I mean, they have their pillars or their values or the things that help them know who fits, what behavior fits, what are we going to spend our time on, our money on, etc. But so rarely do we as individuals or as family units create a set of values. So I wish I'd thought of this on my own. I thought of this board on my own, but this board you're looking at is my values board. It's never too far from me. In fact, it's right on my wall right over here, the real thing, not just the picture of it, so that I can be reminded really, really pretty perpetually what's important to me and who I'm trying to be in this lifetime. And when I have an off day or I have a big decision to make, I reference this quite frequently. It's kind of this values/vision board. So it came to be because when I was a new mom, I was holding my 4-month-old baby daughter, Addie, and I got a frantic phone call from a friend. And her kids were much older than mine. They were in high school, and her oldest daughter was asked in school that day. She was a senior in high school. The teacher said, I want each of you to think about what one value you think your mother hopes to have instilled in you by now. What's the one thing? And they had to write that thing down. They had to talk about it in class. And then they had to put that piece of paper in their pocket and go home and ask their mother, Mom, what's the one thing you hope to have instilled in me by now before I go off to college or presumably on my own? And I get this call. It was one of those calls where she didn't even say hello. She just launches into this story. And she's like, I was so worried that my hands were sweaty. I felt sick to my stomach. My heart was beating fast. I thought to myself, what if I didn't do it right? What if I didn't teach her the right things? What if I get the answer wrong? And she said, and then I just stopped and I took a deep breath and I said, forgiveness. And her daughter picked that paper out of her pocket and it said forgiveness. And I was this new mom, like hormonal, just waterworks down the cheeks. And it was a really impactful story because while I had done this values work with companies for so long, it had never occurred to me how powerful this could be in my own family. So one day later, I was driving in the car with my husband and I pulled out just the quickest piece of scratch paper out of the side door. And I said, what values do you want to instill in our family? This is what it's like being married to a coach, by the way. And we quickly came up with a set of things that we both cared about, and some of our values were separate. But what I can tell you is that it has really been a guide for us. So in our family, the ones that we agree on that are at the top are family, health, and then fun and adventure for us are on the same line. And I can tell you that we have had some recorrections to do. There have been times in my life, especially when I had young kids, where every day, kind of like it is with COVID now, honestly, felt the same. It was like Groundhog's Day. You know, it was like, oh my gosh, every day, wake up, same time, get the kids ready, eat breakfast, have barely a minute to myself, work all day, get home, bed, bath, books, dinner, the whole nighttime routine. And by the time I had any time to myself, I was just exhausted. I used to say my poor husband was like the last one to get a drink of water from the cup. It's like, oh, honey, can we just talk about it tomorrow? And I know that some of you are probably right there in those shoes right now. So there was a time where I said, why am I so low? Why am I so down? Why do I feel high anxiety and low happiness? And when it really came down to it, the adventure factor and the fun factor in our life was very low. And so we were able to say, okay, this third value of ours, we're not living fully to that. It's really affecting our level of happiness. Let's amp that up, right? And at first with little kids, all we did to amp that up was a few 4-day weekends, camping, hiking. It was amazing how it filled the fuel tank. So as we go through this values exercise, where we're going with this is, first, I'm going to help you get to a place where you're just really clear and crisp about what are your values. Then I'm going to have you assess how well, close or far, are you living each one. And then I want you to reflect on just what are you getting right and what do you want to change. And that's going to kind of inform which tips and tools make the most sense for you to utilize. So take a look at this list, and on a piece of paper or in your phone, I want you to write down any of the values words that are meaningful to you. Just write down as many as you want at this point. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to just reflect on this list and write down the ones that are most important. We're just going to have about, 90 seconds or so of quiet time.
And Mitch, something to think about while folks are doing this that maybe you could speak to when we come back is a question that came in, is how do we distinguish values from things we simply like to do?
Perfect. Well, let's get through this exercise and then we can address that.
Hey, Mitch, you probably saw Morgan had a great question around this exercise, meaningful in terms of current status or aspirational. Want to comment on that?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I want you to not be evaluating yourself based on the current conditions or current state. I want you to go right to the core and say, as a human being, who am I? What am I all about? What do I care about? Whether or not someone looking at you from the outside would be able to tell those things right now, like as an example, health is one of my core values. Sometimes I'm killing that one, getting it really right, feeling proud. Other times I let it go, right? And if someone's watching me from the outside and I haven't gone on a walk or gone to the gym or gone to yoga in months, would they know that health is important to me? No, but it still is. So I guess the short answer is it's more aspirational than current, and that we all get this right and not so right at times. So it's who are you at the core and what do you really value at the core? So I'll flash back on this list in just a moment, but what I want you to do next is narrow down your list to no more than 6 and to put them in priority order. So if you had to have a number 1 value, what would it be? All the way down to number 6. I know this can be challenging, but the idea here is that if everything's important, nothing's important. So you've got to really narrow it down. So I'll flash back, and again, you're aiming to get to no more than 6 and have them in priority order. I'll give you just another minute to reflect here. So we're going through this exercise rather rapid fire. And I know that for some of you, you're like, oh no, I got it. You had me at hello. I knew these things in 30 seconds flat. And for others, you may want more time. But we're going to keep rolling, and just please do kind of give me a sense if it feels too rushed or too leisurely. But the next thing I want you to do is, with your list of 6, is to simply reflect, and this is only for you. You don't have to share this with anyone else unless you choose to. And you might choose to after this session. You might share this with a boss or a loved one, or some of this information. But I want you to rate how well are you living each of those values today. So my top 6 values are family, health, fun and adventure, helping others, gratitude, learning, growth. So put yours down and give yourself a rating. 1 is, oops, I forgot that was important. Kind of like my health story, right? Health might be really high in terms of a core value, but I might fall in and out of routines around health, right? So 1 is, oops, forgot it was important. 5 is, I'm so proud of the way that I am just living this value. I cannot imagine getting this any more right than I am right now. And these fluctuate. I mean, these fluctuate day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year. I mean, a couple months ago, I had to have a real talking to myself about how I was handling my children. You know, family as my top value. I was not doing so well in terms of my level of patience and compassion. I was at my limit, and had to make some adjustments to get back to what's important. So give yourself an honest rating. And then the final step, at least for now, is to reflect upon, circle the highest rated area and circle the lowest rated area. And then simply ask yourself a couple of honest questions. What needs to change, and what do you have to get right? So right now, I don't think it's ever been a better time to ask yourselves, what do you have to get right? Because there's so much going on that can distract you from your core values or your core priorities, right? I mean, you might say, I really have to get right. I really have a relationship I need to repair. I really have a relationship I need to make front and center. Or there's, of the 18 things I'm doing at work, these 4 or 5 or top 2 are the most critical, important things I've got to work on and get right. That other stuff, sometimes you hear this referred to as like the big rocks versus the sand and the gravel and the water. That analogy is that if you fill the jar, you only have limited space or limited capacity. If you put the water in and then you put sand in and then you try to fit gravel or big rocks into that jar, there's no more room. So often we will fill our lives with anything from political news or saying yes to relatively unimportant requests from people at work or in our neighborhood or in our families. And then we will have little time left for the things that are really core and really important. So what needs to change? Write down a couple of notes for yourself. What do you have to get right? And the final question, which isn't written here, but I think is incredibly important, is what are you already getting right? What are you already getting right? And I would love to hear actually some of the answers to what are you already getting right into the chat. And pay attention, folks, like to what people are putting in here, because I can tell you, I have had people give each other ideas in the chat box, or sometimes we do breakout groups in this session. And when people talk about what they're getting right, their whole energy lifts, they light up, and they realize in this really stressful time that there's a lot that they're getting right that they're just not paying attention to because they're so busy beating themselves up for the things that aren't going maybe quite as well. So what are you getting right? It might be, gosh, I'm building in enough time for exercise still. I have a really good exercise routine. Or it might be, you know what, I've really dedicated, I think, the right amount of time and attention and love towards homeschooling with my kids. Or I'm mostly patient, or I managed to still have groceries in the fridge. The one thing I've kept prioritizing is healthy food in our refrigerator. Like, there are some things you're getting right. What are those things? So Jenny, anyone putting the bragging hat on?
Yeah, we've got a couple folks who are doing a great job with their exercise routine.
Yay.
Let's see. I'm saying to myself, no is a complete sentence. I'm doing okay at that right now. Also exercising, which is great. Exercise. Choosing love, helping others.
Nice.
Eating healthy. Trying to make more time for fun. growth, listening to podcasts, and reading books.
Nice.
We've got some good things.
Awesome. Okay. So let's keep moving here. So you've got now how you're feeling, how you want to feel more of, what your core values are, and what needs to change. Okay, so now let's start talking about what are some of the things that might be getting in the way of greater peace of mind or, less overwhelm. So some of the common culprits of burnout, and I've heard it mentioned already a few times on this call in various ways. One of the biggies, probably the biggest, is too many priorities and poor boundaries. And that combination of things is messy, right? So some of the questions I have for you is just how are you at crystallizing your priorities, at knowing what the big rocks are? I think many of us had to reset our expectations, but few of us have reset our expectations. When COVID hit, when schools were only going to be shut for a couple of weeks and then they turned out to be shut longer, or when, social distancing or, isolation was, oh, this is only going to be a month, and then it turned into several months. So many of us can kind of hang on for the short term and get through anything, but we're at a point now where we don't quite know how long this is going to go on. And so we really need to have an honest conversation with ourselves, each of us individually, about what is my capacity? And am I given that capacity that is limited, right? Given my limited time, my limited energy, and these things I've just said are really the most important things. Am I spending time on things that I don't necessarily need to be? Can I be using no as a complete word? So do you regularly work nights and weekends? Is your current schedule sustainable? So I got an email from a client. She had this disclaimer at the bottom of it recently, and it said, you may be getting emails from me at odd hours of the day and night. While I don't expect a response from you when you get these emails, I know these work hours don't work for everyone, but they work for me, right? And I know her, and she's got 2 small kids. And my first thought was, wow, it's so great that she's setting that expectation with people. But my second thought was, is that sustainable, right? Because what many folks are doing right now is their workplaces are saying, if you need flexibility, have all the flexibility that you want. But then what that means is you have more things to fit into the same amount of limited energy. So how are you pushing back? How are you reshuffling your priorities? How are you being really diligent and clear about what is actually a priority versus what can be on the someday list or the 6 months from now list? I know Jenny and I, when we have business conversations, we will often call it that. We will call it this belongs on the right now list. This belongs on the right around the corner list, which is usually like the next 3 months to 6 months. And this belongs on the someday list, because I'm a huge dreamer and a big visionary. Some of you might be like that too. And I'm impatient. I'm like the classic, profile of an entrepreneur. Lots of big ideas and super impatient. Jenny's laughing because she's like, yep. And so this means that I have to be knowing that I also have other things important in my life, my health, my friends, my parents, my family. I can't do everything I want to do at work and still have really healthy and productive relationships. So someone said it, learning that no is a complete sentence. I also have a question I've gotten habitual at asking myself that I ask my clients who are overwhelmed with too much, is this question: saying yes to this is saying no to what? Every yes is a no to something, right? So think about that. You want to do somebody a favor? Very nice. What are you saying no to? You want to help somebody out at work? Awesome. But what are you saying no to? Someone asks you if you can get something on a tighter timeline than you once thought. You say yes. What are you saying no to? You saying no to your health? You saying no to time with your family or a promise you made to someone outside of work? But getting really habitual at knowing what those trade-offs are. The second thing that's been really wearing on people, I guess, for lack of better words lately, is the second shift. So the second shift is everything else outside of work. It's your yard, your car, your house, your children, your pets, your doctors and dentist appointments, your family members that you may need your help or assistance, your volunteer activities. It's everything else outside of work. And what the research has shown, even pre-COVID, is that full-time working women still shoulder twice the burden of housework and childcare duties as their full-time working male counterparts. So clearly this is research that's been done on male-female couples, both who work. But what I've been doing lately is I've been asking in mixed audiences, for how many of you does this statistic hit home? And when we have more time to do more polls, and about 72% of the time, people are like, that is spot on. So this statistic really rings true. But one of the things I think that is important for all of us to consider right now is that we aren't the only ones struggling, and that our situation, whatever it might be, is probably similar in some ways, but also really different, right? There are people living alone right now who are feeling lonely. There are people who aren't partnered, whose second shift is overwhelming because they're the only one doing it, and their work lives just got, bigger and faster. People have different spaces that they can work in. I mean, I was talking to a C-level executive the other day who was working out of his toddler's bedroom. There were like lavender walls and a crib in the background, So everybody doesn't have the same amount of space, the same family support, or just even social support systems, or financial needs. There are many people who are struggling and really worried about money right now. And for those of us who are gainfully employed, it might be easy to forget that. So I say this because not that because it's so related to your own burnout, but that I believe that as human beings, we have to stick together right now. And that part of this equation around burnout is kind of utilizing who might have a little more time, bandwidth, energy today or this week, and who that next week it might be the exact opposite, right? So we've got to be really flexible and compassionate, I think, during this time. So regardless of your situation at home, what I want is to just give you a few questions that you can think about, because the important thing is that whatever your home situation is that it's manageable and that it feels fair and equitable. So in the event that you have a partner or that you have others at home that you share the household responsibilities with, you got to ask yourself the question, does it feel fair? What would I like to see operating differently? What might my partner or roommates or whomever you live with, what would they like to see operating differently in the event that you have a partner? Because resentment is really bad for relationships, right? Like we all know that rust is bad for a car. And I always love to say, resentment in a relationship is like rust on a car. If it can just keep growing and it'll just kill the relationship. So I've been thinking about this a lot since COVID and since reading so much of the research that women and people of color have been disproportionately affected by many of the things going on in the world right now. And not just kind of the home duties, but even the emotional and mental toll and of the worry and the fear and the sadness of some of the things that are going on in the world, just really kind of thinking through that. So from the home perspective, what needs to be reshuffled given this current reality? Are there things you can delegate? Are there things you can outsource if you have the financial means to do that? If you don't have a partner, are there other people that you can do some shares with? Like I have a nephew who lives in San Francisco who's overwhelmed with work, and he and a buddy down the street, I thought this was very creative, just recently decided they're both coupled, but working in really overwhelming sort of work situations, and they share dinners. It just alleviates some of the burden of having to cook every night. So they've kind of figured out who they can bubble with, so to speak, to alleviate some of the burden. So just ask yourself the questions: anything need to be reshuffled, delegated, outsourced? I hit on this earlier, that the level of worry and guilt has also been off the charts. And I wanted to share a little research with you because I think this is really interesting and telling. That look at this picture over to the left. It has the female and male brain. This is an image on an MRI brain scan of the female brain at rest and the male brain at rest. Yes, at rest. These are our brains at rest. So when I first saw this image, I think it's Dr. Daniel Amen. Yeah, it is. I said, well, what is active in the male brain at rest? And that is like only the functions of like breathing and your brain reminding your heart to beat, right? But look how lit up the female brain is. Now, all men and all women are not the same, obviously, and we have way more similarities than we do differences. But one of the differences in the research is that women do tend, not all of us, but we tend to worry and ruminate and kind of play things back in our mind a lot. I know this came out really strongly when I first was with my husband. We would get into some sort of argument or conflict. And a few days later, I would still be thinking about it, and I would bring it up to him and I would say, you know, I've been thinking about this and I just want to make sure that this is okay, or that's okay, or there's just one more thing like maybe we should talk about. And he would literally look at me. And for probably 5 years, I thought he was lying when he said this. He would go, are you still thinking about that? Really? You're still thinking about that? And I would think to myself, come on, you're just not aware. Of course you're still thinking about it. And then when I saw this brain scan, I thought, wow, okay, maybe there's something to this. Maybe he does have a little better ability to like time box it, move on, or do a few less rumination cycles. I don't know how many of you are relating to this, but the other thing is I will also share many of my worries with him. And I will just vocalize, you know, things I'm worried about in business or with friendships or with the kids or with anything going on in my life. And he will often say to me, which is maddening, and I'm about to say it to you, by the way, so get ready. He will often say, you got to figure out how to just get over it. You know, you just got to get past that. And, and for years, I would just be, you know, you don't want to hear it from your own spouse. But then I realized, you know what? You really can tell your brain what to do. Here's a little brain hack for you. If you find yourself feeling, let's talk about guilt first. If you find yourself feeling particularly guilty about something, you got to ask yourself the question, is there any change I'm supposed to make right now? Like if you're guilty because you're working 80-hour weeks and you barely see your children and family's your top value, then you probably have an adjustment to make, right? But if you're guilty because you can't be there for your child every minute throughout the day when they want something from you, you have to ask yourself the question, is that reasonable? Is this something I should be feeling guilty over? Is there any adjustment that I need to make? And if the answer is no, you got to give yourself time to ask that question, to think about it. But if the answer is no, you got to put that feeling aside and just say, thank you, mind, for sharing. Thank you, heart, for sharing. Moving on now. Right? Same thing with rumination. Like many of us are in situations where we have to make decisions, and you might be ruminating on the same decision again and again and again. It's cycling on it like, oh, should I go this direction or that direction or this way or that way or this way or that way, worrying and ruminating. And at some point you just have to say, like some wise leader once said to me, if you find yourself thinking about a decision and going back and forth for more than about 5 days, it probably means that either decision is just as good as the other. Like not a entirely satisfying answer, because don't we all wish that one decision was just clearly better and superior to another? Yes, but that's not how life works, right? So if you think about what do you find yourself ruminating about, feeling guilty about, worrying about, is there a way that you can put a time box around it, that you can say, I'm going to give myself permission. You know, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes to either write about or think about or cry about or talk about, you know, this thing that's worrying me. Or I'm going to give myself another day or two to really kind of mull this over. And then I'm moving on, right? Just free the space to just move on. It's amazing how often your brain will listen to you when you time box your worry and your guilt and your rumination. Okay, so with our final couple minutes, I want to take you through some of the tips and tools, many of which I've highlighted already throughout the talk, but I want to really highlight a couple more before we hop into Q&A, Lisa. So the first is to remember that no one in your life wants you to burn out. I think oftentimes when it comes to setting boundaries or protecting ourselves or preserving our core values, living in alignment to those things, it can often feel like those decisions come with a consequence, which is disappointing someone else, saying no to someone else, pushing back against someone else. And that can feel sometimes selfish or just difficult. So what I want to remind you is that no one in your life wants you to burn out. Your teammates, your boss, your spouse, your friends, your loved ones, your kids, nobody wants you to burn out. So protecting you protects those relationships and protects, you know, those folks too. So the first thing I want you to do is to just contemplate. I want you to answer, in my world of all the things I'm doing, are there some of the things that might qualify as like the sand or the gravel, right? Things that aren't specific to my core values that I could outsource, delegate to someone else, decide to care less about. Something I've had to decide to care less about lately has been piles, all the piles that accumulate in my house. I'm like an angry cleaner. I get to this point where I know Jenny's recently seen a story I posted about this on Facebook where I kind of lost it on my family. I have my moments too. But, you know, sometimes we hold ourselves to such high standards. my house needs to be this clean, or I'm supposed to do that Wednesday and now it's Friday and I still haven't done that. Well, does it really matter? Are there things you can care less about? Is there something you can ask for help? Decide with whom you need to recalibrate expectations. Is it someone at work? Is it someone at home? Where do you need to set better boundaries? And how do you take a little bit of a risk, or a small experiment, as I might call it sometimes, in doing that? Because often what stops us from pushing back is fear. We think, oh, I'm going to be less valuable, or I'm going to be seen as less strategic, or what if I am seen as not being able to keep up or get it all done? But in reality, I mean, I've worked with a lot of leaders and managers over the last 20 years, and I have not met one, not even one, who wants their employee to burn out and do everything. In fact, what most leaders will tell me is, I really expect and appreciate when people say, you know, whoa, like there's too much going on. Our quality is going to start suffering. A timeline's going to get missed. Or yes, I can focus on this, but you know, what has to go off my plate? So most people want you to set those expectations. It's just hard to get in the habit of doing that. Decide something that you'll ruthlessly protect, and something ideally that restores your energy, right? And so many of those things, like it might have been your yoga class or happy hour, a certain gym that you went to, or running group you met with on Saturday mornings. And so many of those things are no longer possible because of COVID. So you've got to get creative, and you've got to design some ways to transition, some ways to protect your time. One of the really creative ideas I heard last week was someone chatted into the chat box that her and her husband both still do their commute, even though they don't have a commute. But either one of them in the morning and at night can say, I'm going to go take my commute, which is basically code for I'm going to go take 20 minutes by myself. So they both do that, and it's fair and equitable. So no resentment builds, and they both just know that they need that moment, right? So that was their way of doing this intentional transition, or doing something to restore their energy. So it might be a new hobby. I know I've picked up a couple new crafty things. I'm not a crafter, but I got so bored with Netflix, I finally was like, I guess I need an art hobby. And it's been great. So figure out some new ways to blow off steam, figure out some new ways to restore your energy. And I guess the last thing I'll say for today is, this is temporary. What we're going through right now may not feel temporary, but it is. And you can decide who you want to be through this time. You know, early on when COVID first hit, and I started to notice like the weirdness passing people on the streets, like the paranoia around, you know, you can kind of tell some people are really mask centric and other people are like revolting against masks, and there's all this weird social tension, and people are angsty in parking lots, and I was getting honked at and yelled at, and there was just all this anger like bubbling up on social media, and worry, concern, fear, anger, sadness, like so many emotions out in the world right now. And emotions are contagious. So this is hard work to decide, who do I want to be during this time? Like when I look back in 5-10 years, and I look back on COVID times, or remember that election cycle, remember that time at work when, oh my gosh, my hair was on fire. When you look back, who do you want to have been through this time? And I know that for me, the reason I wrote Get Outside of Yourself is that there's a ton of research that shows that when you volunteer or give back or do good for others, that it's both good for them, and it's also really good for your own soul, right? And your own attitude and positivity. So think about some ways that maybe you can get out of your own chaos or mayhem, if it feels like that right now, and just really decide who you want to be. Maybe that's about kindness. Maybe that's about giving back. Maybe that's about extra love or help for others, if you have the capacity for that. So with that, we have a little less time than I had hoped, Lisa, but I'd love to jump in to some Q&A. And as people type in their questions, I'd also love for you to type in, or write down for yourself, what is your most important commitment that you can make to yourself based on what you heard today to avoid burnout? And again, bring you more of that feeling you want, right? More of that feeling you want.
I loved that. Thank you everybody for participating and sharing in the chat throughout what you're doing right now, in a moment where we can all feel overwhelmed. I saw a theme, and I love in the last few minutes, Mitch, I think this could be a really important topic around boundaries and help. And so I saw a couple of themes I'd like you to talk about, because I had a feeling this is something we all, including myself, would love to get some insight on, which is, how do we set better boundaries with people in our households? And then there was also a comment about, I think, someone who doesn't have family around to even delegate or ask for help. So how do you create almost like a community or a support group, kind of like that larger family, like it takes a village, concept? How can you create it in this time of COVID so that you can, feel a little more in control and kind of get back to those core values for yourself?
Yeah, it's a really important question. And, one of the things to think about is that if nobody wants you to burn out, right? Like, so I think you had a few questions in there. So one is, how do you maybe renegotiate things at home? And there was a really interesting study that was done on married couples a few years ago, when separated and asked who does more in the house. Both people in the couple said me. So there's this thing and yet there's also this Bureau of Labor Statistics stat that I shared with you today. So often what's going on in any given relationship or household, and this happens in my house all the time with my kids, literally say to my husband and I, what do you guys do? We're doing all these chores. What are you guys doing? And can you imagine? I'm sure you can, because I bet your kids maybe say some of that to you. But what we are really clear on is what we're doing. What we're often not as clear on is what other people are doing to contribute. So one of the best ways to do this first, instead of saying, I need a few things to change, is to simply take stock. And we did this as a family not too long ago, actually, at the beginning of COVID. We took stock of absolutely everything that has to get done in our world in order for our lives to function. With the car, with the dog, with the yard, with the groceries, with cooking, with cleaning, with recycling on Monday mornings and trash and everything. Like, we wrote it all down. And then we made some decisions about, like, okay, who likes to do what needs to get done that nobody likes to get done, who has what kind of time, what are everybody's schedules like. And we created something that is imperfect, yet it mostly works, right? There are certain times where someone in the family feels like it wasn't very fair this week. I did more than you did. That comes up. But it's a work in progress. It's never really just static and done once and for all. I think that's the other thing to keep in mind. And if you're living alone, that's a really tough one. Like, if you don't have any family around and you're pretty isolated, I think the one thing to really fall back on is just deciding what is most important. Like, if your second shift, everything outside of work is overwhelming, I think it's maybe making some decisions over the long haul of, do I need this big of yard? Do I want to live here? Is there an easier place for me to be? Is there a place where I have more community or help around? Are there things I can care less about? Do I have the financial means to hire some things out, right? So, like, for instance, maybe we hate organizing, but we find that we have too many things in our house. So maybe you bite the bullet and get rid of 50% of your stuff. By the way, I did this. It was magical. It was a forcing function, Lisa, as you know, because I went traveling. But, less stuff to clean, put away, and organize. Right?
Yeah, that's a big one, right? Clearing out the things that are taking your time, to recognize the stuff around us takes time and energy and stress, and can be stressful.
And so I hope I hit it hard enough, but like, dealing with people in your house with a good deal of curiosity and compassion when you reshuffle things at home, because knowing that they probably see themselves doing things that you don't see or recognize is really important when you come into these conversations.
Yeah,
it's really important.
That's a really great point. Several people commented, I know you said this too, when you see something, when you see someone in your house do something, even if it's small, recognize it and say, thank you for loading the dishwasher, or, hey, thanks for throwing that load of laundry in, because we are human, right? At the end of the day, I think we all just want to feel like we're contributing and we're valuable and we're seen for the things that we're doing to participate, right?
Yeah, and the Gottmans, John and Julie Gottman, who wrote the book, it's like 7 Principles to Make Marriage Work or something. They have some workplace statistics on this too, but they can determine with 80% accuracy if a couple's still going to be married in 5 years. And what they call themselves is plagiarizers of healthy relationships, because what they do is they study people that stay together and what are the habits and behaviors of those couples. And one of the habits and behaviors of those couples is that on average, they have 5 really genuinely nice things that they say, thank you for, appreciative, kind, loving things for every 1 criticism or critique. So think about that. And I thought I've never been able to unhear that statistic, right? Like I think about that in the balance of relationship with my kids, with my friends, with my husband, especially with my, colleagues. It's really important to get the ratio right.
Yes, I love that. I love the Gottmans, and thank you, Gretchen, for putting their link in the chat. They have such great information, and thank you for sharing that stat. You reminded me about it and the importance of looking for goodness. Let's look for the good in this world right now. If each of us look for the good, even the small little good things every day, they are there. That will help us feel better and hopefully contribute to feeling more confident. So thank you so much for joining us. Mitch, thank you so much. Your content was amazing. I know this was like super fast. Just so you guys know, Mitch teaches this workshop to organizations usually in 90 to 120 minutes. So I asked her if she could just give us a snapshot, because I know everyone is busy, and hopefully you're walking away with some tip today to help you feel more confident and avoid burnout. And just a quick shout out for Mitch. Here is her contact information on the slide. Feel free to reach out to her if you or your team are looking to bring in a speaker and do more of a team event. She does an amazing job with your team talking about this issue. If this is an issue that is on your mind with your team, bring her in, and she'll help everybody on the team, absolutely. And then, as you know, we're here at Simplicity. If you're looking for project work, check out our website, simplicityci.com, fill out your profile. We'd love to help you find a project. And on the flip side, if you're a client that's stressed out because you got too much work to do, we've got a huge community of amazing experts. We'd love to partner with you. So reach out to us for a free consultation. And thank you again so much for everybody for joining. Have a wonderful day. And my wish to you is that you go forth, and that thank you for putting this wonderful slide. This is the perfect closing quote. This is Mitch's quote from Henry Kissinger. A diamond is a chunk of coal that did well under pressure. Each of you are that diamond. We might all feel like that diamond right now that's under this chunk of coal, and we're all doing well with the pressure, and we're all in this together. So thank you again for joining us today, and wishing you good health, and see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you.